afternoon and good evening to one and all. Hey, welcome to St. Berkman's College and to this centenary lecture series. This centenary lecture series is a remarkable event that celebrates the 100th anniversary of our esteemed college. And we believe that this event will be a fitting tribute to our college's history and achievements over the past century. So we are proud to host the second last lecture in this series, which promises to be a very insightful and thought-provoking one, I believe. So before we begin, I would like to make a couple of announcements to the attendees. These are just few guidelines. I request all the participants to refrain from introducing yourself with your name and address in the chat box during this session, as this may distract our speaker. And if you have any questions during the lecture, please feel to post them using the chat option, but kindly ensure that they are related to the lecture or its theme. And if your name in Zoom account is different from your official name, please include your official name along with your question in the chat box. And we will post the feedback form in the chat box at the end of the session. Kindly fill it out and submit at the end of this session. And please note that we will not post the feedback form in any WhatsApp groups. And the e-certificate will be issued to the participants who are present throughout the session and submit the feedback form. And the e-certificate will be issued within 3 days. So thank you for your attention and cooperation, and we hope you have a great learning experience. So let's begin our session. Let's observe a moment of silence before we begin. Thank you. So I invite Professor Peter Thomas, Head Department of English, to welcome the gathering as well as introducing our speaker of the day. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nitin. Nitin is the coordinator of this lecture. And good afternoon and good evening to all the participants. And as our own speaker of the day talked about techno and mediascape, we are all in the techno and mediascape. So we are joining from various time zones. I know that Professor Appadurai is joining from Berlin, and it's afternoon for him, and it's evening in India, and I'm sure that someone must be joining from some other part of the world. But anyway, I'm so happy to greet all of you, distinguished participants, scholars, students, and teachers from various parts of India and outside India. I'm so happy to greet you all in the name of the Department of English at St. Berkman's College. As Nitin has mentioned, we have been organizing a series of lectures to mark the 100th year of our college. And many scholars have already spoken, and this is going to be the last but one in the series. And the last one will be delivered by Slavoj Zizek on 17th of March. And I'm very grateful to all those who have joined today. And many scholars and students were appreciating our lecture series so religiously, and they were all part of the program. And now, with these words, I want to welcome all the distinguished participants to the lecture today. And as far as introducing Professor Appadurai, I don't want to sound very formal and very serious, because I want to facilitate a very interesting sort of conversation, so that my introduction shall not be a kind of distraction to any one of you. And so, but I'm very happy that Professor Appadurai is here. In fact, it is his second coming. He was here physically on the campus a few years ago to give our prestigious Shepherd Memorial Lecture. And so he's a very close friend of the department and the college, and a great well-wisher of the department and the college. So I'm so happy that he is here today, in spite of his busy writing schedule and teaching schedule. I know that he's very reluctant to speak these days, but still I have managed to persuade him to talk. And so I just want to say one thing, that to introduce Professor Appadurai, I can say, here is God's plenty. Here is God's plenty, and that is how I would describe his life and career. And in a way, it is not an introduction, because in this, as I said, techno-media world, there's no point in introducing anyone because there's so much information already available. However, I'm trying to build a bridge between and among all of us to have this conversation. And I know that almost 800 people have registered. I don't know how many will turn up. Already around 300 people are here. But most of you are here because you know Professor Padre and his work, probably more than I do, because I am from the discipline of literature, and I must confess my, mild ignorance of his work, though I read a few of his works. And I want to be very brief, saying that Professor Appadurai, as many of you know, is currently the Max Weber Global Professor at Bard Graduate Center, New York. But he is now located in Berlin. He's joining us from there. His research and teaching presently focuses on the intersection of material culture studies, anthropology, social history, and economics. Formerly, he was Goddard Professor in Media, Culture, and Communication at New York University. He is also an honorary professor in the Department of Media and Communication at Erasmus University. Said he was a very able administrator, teacher, and researcher, and he held at universities of Harvard, Chicago, Pennsylvania, then visiting professorship at Harvard, Stanford, Columbia, Oxford, University of Delhi, University of Michigan, Amsterdam, Humboldt University, Witwatersrand University, Johannesburg, and others. And his major works are Modernity at Large, Cultural Dimensions of Globalization in 1996, Fear of Small Numbers, an essay on the geography of anger in 2006, The Social Life of Things in 1986, The Future of Cultural Fact, essays on the global condition in 2013. And the latest one is Failure in 2019, co-authored with Neta Alexander. And today, Professor Appadurai will speak on a very interesting and very debatable and hot topic called the stubborn resilience of caste in India. As I promised, I don't want to take much of your time. So I'm so happy and grateful that Professor Appadurai is here to do this lecture, this centenary memorial lecture for us. So with so much pride, with so much gratitude, and with so much respect and love, let me welcome Professor Appadurai to give this lecture on the stubborn resilience of caste in India. Over to you, Professor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for being such a good friend over a long period and a good host. Indeed, I recall my earlier visit very warmly to your college, and therefore I'm doubly happy to be here again, though this time virtually, to partake and participate in this series, which is, I think, quite a remarkable affair, and also a tribute to the fact that SB College is now a hub for various dialogues on par with any in the world. A tribute, I think, to the leveling potential of the internet, but also to the enterprise and imagination of you and your colleagues and your breadth of interests and commitments, which are known to many people in different parts of the world. So we are all always happy to have a chance to speak at your institution, but also through your institution to others who, as you say, may be joining from different parts of India and perhaps elsewhere. Because I am aware of two things. One, that we don't have indefinite time. I'm going to try to stick to about 45 minutes. Maybe it'll become 50, but certainly I will not tax your patience beyond that. On the other hand, I'm also aware that this is a giant topic and a topic on which almost everybody in this audience, perhaps 100%, have deep knowledge, personal knowledge, scholarly knowledge, and have strong views. So this is a very tricky area to enter because it is not a specialized topic. It's not like giving a talk on, for example, some novel of James Joyce or something where only 20, 30 people know anything. This is an area where everybody knows things and everybody knows many things. So the question then is, what is Appadurai going to add? I mean, we know so much. In fact, was one of my professors used to say, this is a case where we know too much. We read so much and we have read so much in the library and in the newspapers and here and there, that this vast knowledge about the caste system, which is especially relevant to my discipline, anthropology, or what in India you could call anthropology, sociology, has become kind of an enemy of thought. That is to say, we read so much, we are told so much, that it sort of becomes a lot of baggage, and our capacity to think in new ways or independently is a little bit compromised by the size of the archive. So sometimes we are limited when we know too little, sometimes when we know too much. This is the latter case. So let me, with that preface, say that in addition to being very grateful, I'm also grateful for the opportunity to talk in this series, also grateful for the chance to try out some ideas, which are my effort to, as it were, return to the topic of caste, which I was very interested in the very beginning of my scholarly career. But then I drifted off here and there into some other topics, religion, economics, here and there, but caste never went away. So now I'm returning at a much more advanced stage in my career, indeed in my retirement, to try to think about this central challenge in both Indian politics and in Indian scholarship. Why is this thing still with us, the thing we call caste? Okay, so now I launch it. So my fundamental question is, why has caste in India endured for almost 2 millennia, though it is plainly extractive, humiliating, and disenfranchising for the vast majority of the population? This is a fundamental question since it seeks to explain the resilience of certain systems of inequality and focuses on their endurance and durability as systemic features which have to be actively produced and reproduced and not viewed as default on natural conditions. So I plan to treat resilience as an issue which needs to be explained in its own right and not as simply the obverse of change. In this perspective, caste could cast light on race, patriarchy, durable political dictatorships, and other stubborn systems of inequality in different parts of the world. So I think caste is not an isolated thing to understand. It may illuminate other things if it is properly understood. So I have three lenses for my inquiry, which I have to say is an inquiry in its early stages, though the subject is extremely familiar. My own effort to understand and ask this question of resilience is new for me. So I consider this a kind of speculative or initial effort, even for such a familiar topic. So I look at caste, as I say, through three specific lenses. People have had, as you know, scholars, great scholars, have had very different angles on caste. Some of them have stressed cosmological, or if you like, even theological reasons for the persistence of caste. Others have stressed, in one way or the other, power, exploitation, inequality, actual domination. And yet others have preferred to see some kind of intimate face-to-face interaction as the DNA of caste, which never goes away. That is when somebody is looking at another person, what happens? Not the bigger picture of cosmology or the bigger picture of power, but the face-to-face. I want to take something from all these three lenses. So let me discuss each of them briefly, and then go on to give some examples to make the discussion a little more concrete. But let me describe, let's say, these three angles or lenses, which are well established. The first lens, as I said, is cosmological and, if you like, ideological. Why is a system which is transparently unjust, racialized, discriminatory, and humiliating for the bulk of its members remain organizationally impervious to resistance, critique, and reform? So one of the answers is its lack of a centralized organization, elite, or location which opponents can capture or replace. Caste might be described as a cellular system, which appears to spread by replication and reproduction rather than by force or fiat. When caste is eroded in one place or in one group, it relocates to others. In addition, even among the groups that openly deplore its ideological norms, including Buddhists, Muslims, and many devotional Hindu sects, it creeps back in as a principle of social discrimination to allocate spouses, jobs, and privileges, thus gradually introducing these Trojan horses of continuity into the citadels of reform or revolution. In short, caste appears to have an uncanny inner logic which inevitably transforms resistance into compliance. So this fact demands an investigation of why in some societies, cosmologies and sociologies of inequality are so tightly linked. In other words, the theological idea and the sociological mechanism are tightly connected. I will return to this point, but I just want here to say that this is an important issue because we have the mystery in the case of caste that something which is national, it is there from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, we know this, from Bombay to Bangladesh, is nevertheless not got a central management. Where is the Pope? Where is the head of the church? Who is issuing the orders? Hard to say. Yet there is a coherence and there is cellular reproduction. And this is not just today, but for 1500 years, the system has spread in a kind of cellular metastatic manner without any central management issuing the orders. So this is a mystery. Social scientists, how is this happening? How does this occur? Where is that DNA? So we have to return to the question of how cosmology and sociology get tightly connected. That's one lens. The second lens, which is very familiar, is the lens of power, which can be defined as domination and coercion. And this has received huge amount of attention in the existing scholarship on caste from Marxists as well as others who stress that at the end of the day, it's really about what in Hindu thought we would call danda or the lati. That is the key to the whole thing. I prefer to reformulate this lens, which is, let us call it the power lens, in the famous words or terms of Albert Hirschman, a great thinker who wrote a book in 1970, no longer alive, economist, but very broad-ranging, about loyalty, exit, and voice. And he described these three things: loyalty, exit, and voice as the three positions which differentiate among those who stay loyal and uncritical, or loyal and critical, or simply exit their organizations, brands, or parties. So the brilliance of his argument was he said this is not just about political parties, it's also about brands. When do I give up Colgate and move to Pepsodent? I'm no longer going to complain about it, even I'll just leave. That is exit. Loyalty means no questioning at all. And voice is very important. It means I stay, but I want to give you criticism. So if you take these terms from Hirschman, we can see that the longue durée of caste in India is characterized by a large component of loyalty. That means we are just there. We fit. We are in it. A small and usually unsuccessful element of voice. That means complaining, criticizing. And almost no examples of exit. In other words, you just leave. Just say, we have nothing to do with it. That is hard to find. So the question is, why has exit, this is in Hirschman's terms, from caste been so hard? After all, we can change the toothpaste. We can move from BJP to Congress or Congress to BJP. We can move from India to Germany. But caste seems very hard to exit. It's like being inside a theater, but there's no exit. So that should be borne in mind. Why is it so hard for local communities, groups, sects, or associations? And Kerala has a long history of such groups, sects, associations. Why is it so hard for them to simply give up living in the caste system and begin to live according to other norms and regulations? And of course, naturally, I have to note that SB College belongs to one such alternative, which is Christianity in one of its many forms, which also tries to express voice, move out, but you all know better than me that that's easier said than done. So in this regard, in a few minutes, I will look at two groups which have complex links and overlaps throughout Indian history. That is in regard to exit. Ascetics and untouchables. Sadhus, in other words. The role of sadhus or ascetics in Indic history has always involved an idea of voluntary social death, of the abandonment of all worldly ties, especially those of caste. Ascetics embody forms of withdrawal, penance, and physical self-presentation, which are outside the norms of caste, whether renunciation is by the individual or by an organized group of renouncers. On the other hand, many untouchable leaders in communities, forcibly placed outside and below caste society, forced to do its filthiest jobs, scavenging, cremation, sanitation, have identified with ascetics, and I will say more about this in a minute, and have seen themselves as part of the religiously sanctioned idea of the saint, renouncer, or sadhu. This image and these efforts, however, have not had much success in changing the horrible conditions in which most members of untouchable castes live. And communities of ascetics who have renounced their previous caste lives have also had very limited success in changing the system as a whole, since they often consent to live symbiotically with the larger caste order. So we have to examine this also a little more closely. The final lens, so now I've talked about power, efforts to exit, and I will return to all of these several times with more details. The third lens, first is cosmology, second is power, third is what I call, following Pierre Bourdieu, habitus. And this is the daily life, what happens day to day, not what is happening at a grand level of theology or at the overall level of power, dominance, coercion, but just everyday interactions. So here we move away from grander cosmologies or textual prescriptions, for example, of dharma, or the tautologous idea that it is due to power differentials, coercion, and hegemony. See, this power argument is very tricky because the question is, why does it have so much power? Then I have to say, power explains power. That doesn't take us very far. That is why I'm looking beyond. Because many people say, why bothering? Upper caste, Kshatriyas, Brahmins, whoever, they have the power. But I say, why do they have the power? Why? I also want power. Why do they have the power? Instead, I think we need to ask why inferiors in the traffic of daily life, inferiors, so regularly pay homage to their superiors, accept the daily humiliations with which status is reinforced. Sorry. And consent to a caste-based presentation of themselves in everyday life. In other words, if you have a Dalit person, he somehow will reveal that, and the Brahmin will reveal that in relation to him. So some everyday life has some tyranny in it. And I will return to the tyranny of the everyday because I think that's a very important part of the answer to my question. Why does this system live on forever? Why does it seem to have 1,000 lives? This compliance with the face-to-face tyranny of caste can be, for example, seen in the work of, by reference to the work of the great sociologist Irving Goffman on the presentation of self in everyday life, rituals of interaction, and so on, which Goffman showed us how human beings are pushed into conformity even in those situations where they are apparently free to do as they please. What, in other words, is the tyranny of etiquette, like you might say good manners, which penetrates into the most intimate spaces of touch, taste, and sight, thus keeping the rules of caste alive in daily life in the face of numerous laws, social movements, and moral criticisms of it, which are frequent in Indian history. So this face-to-face aspect is really very important, and we must bear it in mind. That is, at the end of the day, you can have any cosmology, you can have any power, but somebody, when they see somebody else, has to comply with the etiquette. So Goffman gave great everyday examples. For example, somebody is walking the street, they trip on their shoelaces, and they say, oh, sorry. But there is nobody there. You don't have to apologize. Who are they apologizing to? They are apologizing to the social force of the idea that you can't look incompetent. Or he gave another example in what he called total institutions, lunatic asylums, for example, where all kinds of people who are considered psychotic observe all kinds of rules of who is superior, who is inferior, what you should do, what you should not do. So Goffman's question was, there is no escape from the tyranny of everyday life. Even if you're a lunatic, even if you are in prison, even if you are completely excluded, you tend to comply. So that is something we need to ask. So my aim in using this particular lens, which is the tyranny of etiquette and of everyday life, it's that it might explain how lower castes themselves might contribute to the resilience of caste. The central phenomenological factor here is that while caste means being humiliated, dominated, and excluded, for most castes, except Brahmins, you could say for 97% of the population, that is what it means. And especially for the bottom 40, let us say the Dalit population, caste is also the surest route. This is the paradox, by the way, is the surest route to some measure of dignity, security, support, and even livelihood for many lower caste individuals. Thus, since inclusion in one's caste, let us say I'm from a cleaner caste, that is caste that is doing safai or cleaning in the north. Since inclusion in one's caste is the key to surviving exclusion by other castes, one support, even if these goods are hemmed in by hierarchy and exclusion in the larger system. In short, unless caste can be overthrown completely at all levels and in all contexts, it is extremely risky to refuse compliance with its rules and norms in ordinary life. This is the key point. In other words, if you belong to a very low caste, let us say, your caste is producing your daily humiliation. But it is also your only security. Who is going to take care of you? If you're in a village and you want to go to the city, who is going to give you a job? Who is going to marry you? Who is going to help your son get a job? Only people inside your caste. So there, your caste is both your burden and your insurance policy. So very important point, why you can't just say to people, hey, just leave it. Why don't you just exit? Easy to say. And the second point I'm making is I invite you to consider how many people don't have this problem. Very, very few. So you can go way up to the top, Kshatriya caste, Rajput caste, dominant caste, this, that. They have the same issue. If they walk out, where are they going to go? Are they going to get jobs by converting to something else? For example, religious conversion? Maybe, but it's not guaranteed. That is why, as you know, there is another very familiar thing that even when conversion happens to Islam or to Christianity or to other things, caste principle continues because it's the only sure way of assuring some insurance. That is why you can't just simply say, well, this is a bad thing, forget it, everybody should be one, etc. It's very difficult, even though the motives in both the people doing the missionizing and who accept conversion are genuine. So this is not about cynicism. It is saying it is practically difficult to extricate yourself from that micro identity. Again, we will come back to this. Now, I want to say a little bit more about some of the examples about these dimensions. That is the cosmological dimension, the power dimension, and the everyday life distinction, just to flesh them out a little bit before I come to a kind of very preliminary conclusion, trying to answer my question, which is a simple question, but tricky to answer, but I still think it should have a simple answer somehow. Otherwise, what's the point of taking on a grand tour and saying at the end, there are many things involved? Well, you already know there are many things involved. So what is the news then? So I have to simplify somewhat, but I will come to that in a minute. So let us take a big case of an effort to resist the caste system, and especially to resist, let's call it Brahminic Hinduism. And that is the case of Buddhism. And Buddhism, as you know, has two big moments in Indian history. One is in the first millennium, from the time of Gautama Buddha till about the 10th century. You all know that Buddhism had a huge following throughout India, as did Jainism. That's a slightly different story, but connected. But by the 10th century, it has lost. It's done. I often like to say to my students that Buddhism is the greatest example of something produced in India, but only succeeds overseas. Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, Korea, China, Japan, now Colorado, here, there. But in India, very limited. Of course, there is some revivals and all, and I will come to that in the 20th century. But by and large, you could say a system that almost became all India is now only an export product, by and large, except for Gaya and 2-3 people coming from here and there. And Maharashtra, very important site, which I will talk about in a minute. Buddhism, did not work. And the question why Buddhism did not survive has been the subject of a very large amount of literature and debates, mostly among historians and archaeologists. And they have a lot of answers about it, which have to do with Buddhism's urban quality, Buddhism's mercantile connections. There's a lot of debates and fine points, including arguments by some of our most distinguished historians like Romila Thapar. But none of them feels they have completely cracked it, because it's a bit of a mystery. It's a bit of a mystery. It's hard to explain fully. But I would say it's a very good example that even at the cosmological level, when the critique of Brahminic Hinduism is very much made at a high normative level, the Buddhists are saying this is not the way the world is. These people are, that is Brahminic thinkers who are enforcing the caste system, have mistaken the nature of reality itself. They are making something which is illusory, impermanent, Maya, into something real and then enforcing it. So it's a high-level argument. It is not just a small thing saying, no, you shouldn't mistreat people. It's a fundamental argument. And it is socially organized. That is, people are put into Buddhist communities, they begin to live, they have their own monastic order, so the asceticism question also comes in. But at the end of the day, Brahminic orthodoxy, led by people like Shankara, who is, of course, a proud son of Kerala, it should not be forgotten. Though we Tamils like me try to think Shankara is our man, but Shankara is not our man. We say he has to be seen to be what he is. He is from Kerala. Although, of course, the state of Kerala didn't exist as such in Shankara's time, that also must be pointed out, but geographically. So people like Shankara and then others later made it impossible for Buddhism to survive, either theologically or practically. Endowments, land, support. So the factors are multiple, but we must recognize that the biggest ideological effort to unseat Brahminic Hinduism after 10 centuries almost had to give up, basically lost and had to move out. Now, Buddhism has a second life, as we well know. Why? Dr. Ambedkar, Maharashtra, massive conversions. But I have to say, without going into all the details of that story, about which also there is an excellent literature, both by scholars based in India, Dalit scholars, non-Dalit scholars, American visiting scholars like the great Eleanor Zelliot, who wrote on Maharashtra and conversion and the Mahars in great detail. They also have a hard time understanding or explaining why this movement to Buddhism, inspired by Dr. Ambedkar, coming from the bottom, somehow never becomes national and somehow can never uproot upper caste power in Maharashtra, which is, of course, one more variation on the axis between Marathas, who are the dominant political group, and Maharashtrian Brahmins, Pune Brahmins and others, Chitpavan, so on and so forth. Smaller number, but allied with Marathas. So today, if you look at Maharashtra, I just returned from a week in Bombay. I mean, the Dalit voice is very small. The whole battle is between Shiv Sena, BJP, Sharad Pawar, this Thackeray, that Thackeray, brother, uncle, this one, that one. That is the whole story. 0 to 100 is among Marathas with a few Brahmin voices thrown in. They are dominating Maharashtrian politics. If you say, where is the Dalit voice? Answer is it's in the slums. And it is a vote bank. And these men from the upper caste will come and appeal to Dalits for this and that. And of course, there are major pockets of Dalit activism, Dalit resistance, Dalit poetry, Dalit music, all true. But if you say in the bigger political landscape of Maharashtra, where are they? Answer is not very encouraging. They have been successfully repressed and depressed in spite of the living history of Dr. Ambedkar and other people who have taken up the cause, not only the Dalit cause, but the Buddhist cause. And in my mind, honestly, the Buddhist solution is a very good solution because it's homegrown. It's very close to Hinduism, but still different. It has a lot of appeal, but it could not. So for me, it is no surprise then that Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Zoroastrianism don't have as much reach because even Buddhism could not go very far. Jainism even less far, very restricted in terms of castes and so on and so forth. So the point of this discussion about failure of Buddhism to replace Brahmanism, what I take away from it is not a big new contribution to the debate about the end of Buddhism. It is simply that the cosmological connection in Hindu thought between the law of karma, let us say, and the rules of dharma, what I should do in every day, is a tight lock. So whether you're at the top or at the bottom, it is very hard to find somebody in India. You can ask them in a simple way, do you believe that there is some karmic law governing your life? Very few will say that's nonsense. Some version they'll say, yeah. And then it becomes a key to why I should do my appointed job in this life. That is the dharma karma lock. That is the Hindu, for me, formula. That is the IP of the Brahminic Hinduism, dharma karma. And that Buddhism has found it impossible to unlock and replace. So that's a preliminary answer. But let me go on to also say something about the little more detail about the impossibility of exit. And this is a political matter that many people know, that I've already mentioned the connection between untouchables and sadhus. That is, there have been very important movements, say, for example, in Lucknow in the early part of the 20th century, where Dalit writers and thinkers, as documented by my colleague R.S. Khare at the University of Virginia, explicitly said, we are the same as the sadhus of Indian history. We are the renouncers. We do not go back to Hindu Brahmanism. We go back to the great renouncers. Hence the popularity of the name Valmiki. Valmikis as a group. So it is saying, we are not you. Don't think we are you. We are those who are always against you. It's a brilliant move. And it is made by many, many untouchable leaders and thinkers in North India, that our heritage is not Brahmin heritage, it is ascetic heritage, sadhu heritage, it is a counter heritage. It is not Brahminic Hinduism, it is something else. So it is a civilizational argument saying, please don't mistake us for the lowest. We ended up below for all kinds of reasons, but our forebears are fully equal to you. They are the people who renounced Brahminic society. They left, they went to the forest, they went outside the system. They are our ancestors. That is putting it very simply. But in many Dalit movements, especially in North India, in the last century, you can see this theme. We are the same as ascetics. We are sadhus. Don't say we are the bottom of your system. We are a separate system. We are a counter system. But then the reality also is there in North India, particularly, but you can see it elsewhere in India too, perhaps in Kerala also, is something we all know, that lower castes have been brought into the fold of electoral politics, first by becoming vote banks. And that is long before the BJP. Going after Dalit communities for votes is an old game. But what the BJP has done is said, actually, you are the shock troops of Hinduism. You are really our Hindu soldiers. And obviously, that's a very ironic message to give to people who have been abused by Hinduism for 1500 years. But there is something about the nature of electoral politics, of aspiration, of identification with those above you, that a certain number of members of Dalit groups are willing to enter the vote banks and the street struggles of the BJP. So I bring this up because it illuminates why this other argument that we are untouchables, we untouchables are not untouchables, we are sadhus, we are outside, has actually failed. And why it has failed has something to do with the BJP's militant Hinduism, which has now drawn Dalit groups and, of course, created a kind of divide and rule. The Muslims are taking it away from you. This one is taking it, of course, Christians and so on and so forth. And convincing Dalit populations, not all of them, of course, that they are really aligned with Hindus. This is a remarkable achievement, propaganda achievement from the BJP, but it cannot be denied. And it also links to something I'm going to return to in my conclusion, that this also belongs to what we call politics of the census, counting people. Are you this? Are you that? Are you this? My first guru and teacher of anthropology at the University of Chicago, who has not been alive for a long time, Professor Bernard Cohn, C-O-H-N, wrote an article which he showed me. First, he wrote it and didn't print it in 1970. It was called The Census and Objectification in South Asia in the Colonial Period. He was the father of the idea that when the census went into the Indian landscape, British census, starting in the middle of the 19th century, and began to ask people, what caste are you, this, that. People said, oh, you think we are low caste? Actually, we are high and we fell. So a whole series of mobility movements were provoked by this. And so Kuhn was the first guy. And by the way, he had not read Foucault, he had not read anything, but he got the idea that the colonial apparatus, through its forms of knowledge, created new kinds of identity and identification on a large scale. This has continued throughout, from 1850 till now. That is, the whole census, caste census complex cannot easily find a way around the fact that when the state asks you who you are in terms of caste, it has a Heisenberg problem, meaning it's disturbing the very, it can't just say, just tell me. No, no, no. It means what answer is best. So if I become OBC, is it better? Or if I say I'm slightly below but need to get into OBC, is that better? So people make calculations. And so this idea of caste census, and I'm going to return to it in my conclusion, has a very complex productive effect. It is not a neutral instrument. How many are this? How many is that? It has always created provocation for reclassifying and for mobilizing and saying we used to be this, now we are that. That turbulence has been there from the middle of the 19th century when the British instituted the census. So the fact that today in North India, many members of Dalit castes are being co-opted through the electoral process and through other kinds of blandishments to line up with BJP Hindutva, the very religion that has oppressed them for 1500 years, is a little bit because of this. That is this mechanism which has to do with count. Who are you? And see, there are two ways of being counted. One is just by answering the question, filling the form. The other is by acting. You go and attack some Muslims or some Christian priest somewhere, you are showing who you are, which is that you're a proper Hindu, which means that you're not so low, which means you need not be excluded. Of course, these things never really work, but there are efforts to demonstrate, certain solidarities in the hope that they will help you in your struggle for everyday dignity and everyday life. So let me move now finally to the last subject, which I've already mentioned very briefly in my conclusion. And that is the tyranny of the face-to-face. At the end of the day, whether there is politics going on at the massive scale, census politics, vote politics, national politics, party politics, or whether it's cosmological ideas which are very hard to undo, like the dharma-karma link, the main place where caste continues to live, in spite of legal protests, religious protests, bhakti protests, secularist protests, whoever is protesting, whether they are from the Dalit classes or above, it's in daily life. And in daily life, when Kerala is a great example of this, because in the anthropological literature, we know that it was not so long ago that if someone belonging to the untouchable caste saw a Brahmin man or woman approaching, 15, 20 feet away, the idea was to move out of their way, avoid their gaze, not pollute their environment. Kerala is a living repository of these things in slightly extreme form, but they're available everywhere. In other words, as long as people who are below one another or above one another insist on certain behaviors, certain behaviors of ordinary life. Will you take water from me? Will you take water in a clay cup or only in a porcelain cup? Will you take water from my well? Or famously in Kerala, can you come into the temple? Can you come into the temple when you're menstruating? Can you come into the temple if you're a lower caste and you're menstruating? Etc. etc. This is daily life. It's not a major political issue. It's who complies with the etiquette of caste in the small transactions. And remember, if you multiply these transactions across whole of India, there are 1 million of them every day. So it doesn't matter if you oppose caste in the newspaper or here or there or in your vote, but daily life. And here we come back to the problem. If you say, why do people comply? Why don't they just say, touch the Brahmin and move on? You might say it's because they're afraid of some kind of physical attack. That may be. But there is something else, which I already touched on before, which is that signaling their belonging to their own caste is also important for their survival, for their marriages, for their jobs, for their security, because you can't live easily in India as a simple individual. Tell me who in India, from Mukesh Ambani down to the poorest Dalit, can say, I'm just my person. I don't need anybody. Mukesh Ambani needs hundreds of people for his daughter's weddings, for this, his servants, his staff, his workers, his employees. See, nobody is, if I may quote from a literary source, an island unto themselves. And this is especially true in India. Island business is simply not operative in India. Therefore, the lower you are, the more important it is to keep your attachments alive. But I also want to say about the face-to-face, that there is something very important about which I have written separately. I won't take a lot of time because our time is short, which is at the bottom of the everyday, there is an affective universe. And that affective universe has to do with the idea that anybody below you in this system is actually disgusting. It's a sensory idea. Their bodies are filthy. They are disgusting to you. And the beauty is, this goes all the way up to the top. So, of course, Dalits are seen as disgusting by many people because even if they don't do it themselves, somebody in their family is a scavenger, somebody is doing crematorial work, somebody is doing something, somebody is taking garbage away. Okay. But as you go higher up, all the way to Brahmins, the interesting thing is if you look at orthodox Brahmin life, or even people who are loose Brahmins, they are dominated by fear of the sensorium. Their own feces, their own blood, their own sweat is horrifying to them. You see, the dilemma starts at the top. So if I'm a Brahmin, my first fear is myself. I'm not going every day and encountering Dalits. So what is my fear? My fear is my own body. So as you move down, that is attributed to whole groups. That whole person is dangerous, disgusting, etc. But I myself am dangerous and disgusting. What am I to do about that? Commit suicide? No. So you can see that the whole Brahmin social order, ritual order is dominated by self-disgust. They won't say that. They won't say we are disgusted with ourselves, so please kick us out. No. But the truth is, the logic is of disgust with the sensory signs that you are a physical, bodily human being. So there is excellent work by my colleague, Professor Tirumar in Hyderabad, who has done, along with his students, some excellent work on the IITs and so on. And the fear of having Dalit students there because they are seen as physically clogging the workings of the mind, which should not have any body at all. They are pure body, whereas the upper ones are seen as mind. But the mind itself is in a body. So even if you kick all the Dalits out, you will have your own body. So Tirumar and others, Gopal Guru, Sundar Sarukai, have shown us that there is a sensorium in which there is terror and disgust of the one slightly below you. And to this, I want to add one other thing. which is one of the things I learned after teaching about caste for 40 years, that in India, caste has a clear top. Let us say some ideal Brahmin who is praying every day, doing puja from morning to night, cleaning himself every minute. But there is no bottom. What do I mean? There is no Dalit individual or family that does not have another Dalit doing some service for them. Cleaning, wiping, barber, this, that. So show me one Dalit who says, I'm the last Dalit. I do all my own things. Does not exist. So it means in the next village, you have somebody who does that for you. So truth is, in daily life, based on this idea of the senses and of the body as being disgusting, Dalits are the source of fear and disgust or provocation only on a mass scale, but everybody has it. Although nobody is free. So now I come to my conclusion, which is a simplified speculation. Why does this system persist? And I've tried to touch on cosmology, power, and face-to-face. To say that the reason for the persistence, in my view, finally slowly emerging to me, that caste has a unique capacity through certain methods like the census, etc., of creating large solidarities. In other words, every Dalit from Kanyakumari to Kashmir can say, I am Dalit, Ambedkar, or Brahmins for that matter. So you can aggregate upwards, which happens in politics and all that. The logical end of that should be, we are all one. But people stop short of that. Why do they stop short of that? Because there is another tendency in caste, which is the opposite. Not more and more and more, but less and less and less. So smaller and smaller group. I'm superior to you. When I marry, your subcaste is little lower than mine. You see that logic? Where the unit shrinks in its reality. And finally, it's just me. Ideally, I would not marry, I would not work, I would not touch anybody, I'd just be by myself. That's the logic. So on the one hand, the logic is of aggregation. The other hand, the logic is of differentiation. In Indian society, and here I conclude, I think the reason why this system is very hard to get rid of is because it works on the connection between the aggregative and the differentiating. That is the fusion of entities so they can get huge formations, and the fission, tiny micro castes all saying, we are better than you, we are better than you, till finally there's only one family and finally only one person who says, I'm the cleanest, I'm the safest. So there's a micro differentiation going on at the same time as a macro aggregation. In India, I think some reason these two things have been connected very tightly, and that is hard to break. So if you try at the micro level, you fail at the macro level. You go for the macro, you fail at the micro. So doing it at both ends requires a remarkable imaginative leap, which nobody has been able to supply. So I stop there, and thank you for your kind attention. And I'm happy to, especially if Thomas can look at the questions and just summarize or tell me some things to answer, I am happy to do so. Thank you.
Nitin will do
Professor. Thank you, Professor Appadurai, for your insightful lecture. And we will now move on to the question answer session. And I can see that there are already a few questions posted in the chat box. So the first question is from Keshava Marwada. And his question is that, how does the concept of double consciousness for Dalits help to challenge the idea of Brahminical superiority, especially considering that Dalits are often situated at the bottom of the caste system and considered untouchables?
Sorry, I couldn't fully hear. I'm also opening the chat box so that I can also read.
Okay, sir. Yeah.
I just give me 1 second, please. And I will go up and I will look, and I'm looking for. So I see Kesha, yes.
Yeah.
How do you locate double consciousness as of Dalit being as important to give meaning to Brahmanical out of caste system? Yes. Yes, thank you very much. I can give a quick response. This is a very deep question. What I would say is this double consciousness is real. and very important, and it's very tricky because it also gives Dalits tremendous power, because without Dalits, what is Brahmin? Zero. So it's what someone like Levi Strauss would say, that the opposition, both parts are important. So in a way, if you remove the Dalit population or the Dalit question, Brahmin question would have no standing. Conversely, same is true for Brahmins. So I would say there is a double consciousness there also, and I speak as someone who grew up in a Brahmin household, that there is a double consciousness there, where on the one hand, we are the best, we are the cleanest, we are the purest. On the other hand, we are horrified about our own bodily issues. Our women are menstruating, we are touching this, we are doing that. It's a horrifying thing. I've seen my parents, my grandparents living 24 hours a day as if they are in COVID. Don't touch this, don't do that, hold this up, hold that far. It's a nightmare. So both sides have double consciousness, and the big challenge becomes what happens in the middle. That is the middle caste. They have a touch of Dalit double consciousness and a touch of Brahmin's double consciousness also, because they are a little bit above. So that's a deeper issue, but I think your point about double consciousness is correct and important.
Nitin, somebody has asked whether they are free to unmute and ask questions. Please consider that also. Let's have some live interaction as well.
Okay, sure.
Do you mind that, Professor Appadurai? Like, can we have a live interaction?
I'm totally open, so long as you can
Yeah.
just help me navigate between the written and the spontaneous.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
I am happy to hear. It's good to have some sense of life as opposed to only, graphic design.
Yeah, that's.
I agree.
Yeah, Nitin will negotiate that. He is good at that.
Well done. So,
Sir, can we move to the second question?
yeah, please.
Yeah, it's from Yash Javed.
So is it from the chat? I can open
it's
the
from
chat.
the chat. It's from the chat. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, tell me what it is, and if I can follow it, I can answer without opening it.
So the question is, how do you look at caste and friendship, and by extension in socio-political parlance, fraternity or fraternal bond, and the latter being this worldly counterculture to the resilience of caste as opposed to the other worldliness of asceticism?
Very good. Wonderful question. Thank you very much. I had not really thought of that aspect, because friendship can go in two directions. One is friendship crossing caste boundaries, which I think you are pointing to. The other is friendship within your own extended caste, which can be something different from instrumental approach to jobs, marriage, this, that. It's simply companionship, sympathy, empathy. So it's a very important force. I would say the question is, when and how can friendship be a resource to actually help you survive outside the dictates of caste? When does it allow you? Let's say if two friends or five friends who are from different castes start a business and start generating jobs, that's very important. But how often, does that happen? The feeling is perhaps not often enough. But you are right that as a dimension, friendship is understudied in places like India, because people think everything is which class, which caste, which this, which that. But friendship has potentially the power to dissolve all those things. So I think it's a good thing, but we have to ask empirically, when does it dissolve, and when does it actually support various things? So if you look, I've been watching a lot of the more recent crop of films from Kerala, which give glimpses of village life, small town life, etc. Films, movies about Kerala. Friendship is very important in them, but often within the caste. I don't see it very frequently crossing. Anyway, that's just a small observation. Thank you, though.
So we can have one more question from the chat, and afterwards I will go for the other participants. I mean, one raise hand is there. So the question is from Beena S. Nair. The question is, could you comment on the politics of caste in academic community?
Yes, thank you. I can, and I refer again to the work of my colleague Thirumal, Professor of Media Studies, a senior scholar at the University of Hyderabad, who has a group of students with him also. And I would say has been doing the best work on academic institutions and caste, especially with reference to the IITs and so on, but all university settings, showing the sensory dynamics of exclusion that occur in these places. And I would say this is to me, much more powerful as an insight than the idea of merit, mandal, merit, this, that is there. We all know that there's a struggle over that, and it's a legitimate struggle, but it does not touch the sense that upper caste communicate, especially in Tamil Nadu, for example, to Dalits, that their very presence is physically a kind of disturbance, just the sheer presence. So I think that is a very important insight. And I do think, therefore, the effort to make academic institutions more welcoming to Dalit men and women is partly a matter of policy, quotas, and so on, but partly the much more difficult matter of cultural change, of making it clear to the dominant upper caste in these institutions that it is improper, morally dubious to give Dalit students a sense that they are kind of polluting their environment, because it's false and because it's unfair. Maybe I can leave it there. There's more to say, of course, but that's my general view.
Thank you, sir. Dr. K. Kavirsha has raised his hand. I think he has a question to ask you. Sir, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, over to you, sir.
Sir, thank you, sir. So first of all, I just in the recent years, I have listened many lectures, and this is one of the finest lectures which has given or which has shared a kind of controversial topic in a non-controversial way. And of course, it is something great to hear from you. And just I have one query, sir. How do you look at reservation or quota system in India, where many claim that they do not want this caste system, but they want this the benefits of reservation or quota system, whether it be of the lower caste or upper caste. Now this EWS also they want. I'm sorry, sir.
No problem. This is my cough. No worries. I'm hearing you on the quota system. Please just.
They also want to enjoy the privileges of this quota system or reservation. So when if you want to eradicate this caste system, you are still in more and more.
So please just remind. I cannot see clearly your name in my screen.
Sir, I am Kaviyarasu, Dr. Kaviyarasu from Tamil Nadu.
Sorry. I don't see your name here. That is why I was wondering. I was seeing some other names here. Sanjay, Bisoi, Anil Varghese, etc. But that's my screen problem. Don't worry. It's fine. I get your question. It's a very deep question, because in one way, people, and I'm not original here, when you look at the debates, both on caste census, affirmative action, quotas, because they're all connected. They all have to do the merit question. And there is one position which says any form of this is terrible because it goes against the goal of annihilation of caste, Ambedkarite goal, that there is no way to reach that goal and keep having quotas, that you have to find some other way, whatever the other way may be. The other position says quotas are fine, but for example, if you consider OBCs, maybe it's legitimate and it's practicable. You can actually count that. But if I say everybody in India has to be counted, then that is a very difficult task from a technical point of view, from an anthropological point of view, because the number of castes is like the Milky Way, it is large and it is growing. So very hard to do. But if you target a certain group, Yogendra Yadav from Delhi, who's now in politics, has made a very good argument saying OBC quota thing can be done. It's just adding one column. It can be done. It is practical. Now, is it a good idea? Because as you know, everybody wants to, as the joke goes, everybody wants to be in the back of the bus. Only the driver is left. Brahmins want to be in the back of the bus. Kshatriyas want to be in the back of the bus. OBCs, of course, want to be in the back of the bus. And Dalits are by definition in the back of the bus. So the back is now like third class sleeper, fully crowded. Nothing is left in second class, first class, etc. Nobody wants to be there. So that is the heart of the problem, is that my answer to this dilemma is that quotas are a short-term solution and they're a partial solution because they don't change the overall fundamental social consciousness surrounding caste. But you can't say for that reason, let's not do it. Everybody should be treated as equal. Because that means the whole story will be always the same. So we have to find some balance and also target quotas. So they are for people who have suffered particularly. And the famous phrase, creamy layer. See, if you do a quota system where only creamy layer is benefiting, what is the point? So it has to be genuinely inclusive. And that's also hard to do. But if you can, I am all in favor of that as a short to medium term goal, but not forever. Because then the principle continues forever, the caste principle. I'll leave it there.
So thank you for positively replying. Thank you, sir, for understanding the question. Thank you.
Professor, there is one participant called Amil Varghese. He wants to ask you a question. Amil Varghese, are you there?
Am I audible? Hello? Am I audible?
Yes,
Hello?
see Varghese's screen, but he may have.
Sir,
Hello,
am I
Amil?
am I
Yeah,
audible
you are
now?
audible. You are audible. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I just have a question. It's actually written in the chat box too. So, first of all, Professor Arjun Appadurai, thank you for the very insightful lecture. So, my question to you, Professor Arjun Appadurai, is that don't you see that this claiming to be casteless is a privilege that the upper that is the sole privilege of the upper caste? And whereas, and also, could you please share your thoughts on the caste discrimination that is happening in the, say, in the Silicon Valley? With the during the lockdown, we also came across the case that happened in Cisco, a tech giant in Silicon Valley.
Yes.
So, could you please share your insights on that? Thank you.
Correct. So thank you. These are very to the point questions. And in a way, the casteless issue and the Cisco issue take us in different directions. You're absolutely right that the issue of claiming castelessness is easy to do if you are highly privileged in the caste system. On the other hand, the big calls for annihilation of caste have come from Dalit movements also. So they are also there. See, there's a difference between annihilation of caste and casteless. Casteless usually comes from the uppers and is a bit of a bogus claim because they do not want castelessness in all matters. Do they want it in marriage? Do they want it for their daughters? Answer is no, they want it for some things because that seems like a good liberal thing to open jobs and all that. But when it gets close to the body and to the family and to the person, castelessness is not so appealing for people above. That said, I think for the genuinely justice-seeking members of the lower caste, especially the Dalits, who call for the annihilation of caste in the Ambedkarite spirit, that is not castelessness. That's really saying we need to destroy caste. It's not saying free of caste or dissolve it or something. It's destroy it. That annihilate is a very strong word. as different than saying castes. Now, the Cisco case and all, I think refers to something very real, that is a community I know somewhat because I was in the US for almost 50 years and watched the first generation of people coming to engineering schools long before internet and digital revolution. Half the people coming from India were engineers, coming to Michigan, coming here, mechanical, electrical. Suddenly electrical became electronic became digital, digital became Silicon Valley became Sundar Pichai. That is all a story, slow story, but there is absolutely no doubt that the poster children of Silicon Valley are typically upper caste, very often Brahmin, and I would say statistically very often Brahmins from the south, and to be even more specific, Tamil Nadu and Andhra. Even more, I think, than Kerala. But this is just impressionistic. And they are, of course, totally casteist, completely ready to exclude, to do favors to each other, but not to people they think are dubious caste origins. It's an awful situation. So I'm 100% clear that in the current moment, caste lives in overseas diasporic situations. And as with many things, such as nationalism, caste is more alive overseas even than in India, though that's hard to imagine. Marriage, jobs, everything. Green card business is simply dominated by caste considerations. Openly advertised in all the marriage ads, all the wedding sites, is open. There's no problem. So you're absolutely right to put your finger on that, and to also point out that castelessness is not something easy for people who are at the bottom, who are reminded of caste every day, but as I said, who also need their own caste solidarities to survive. You can't tell them be casteless. Where am I going to go then? Japan? I have to live in where I am. I hope that's helpful.
Professor, I'm taking one question from the chat box. It's from Pinku Bosali, an assistant professor of English from Calcutta. The participant asked this question: can you please explain how the casting of food is seen among the Dalit people? Is it necessary to caste food?
Thank you. We have not as many studies of food transactions, if I understood your question right, among the lowest castes, that is untouchable caste, as we do of food transactions among middle and upper castes. That is correct. But we have enough. As I say, nobody's the final stop in the station. Everybody has somebody below. So even in a Dalit wedding, you will see that great care is taken about who is fed what. So you will have your own equals, so to speak, if you're hosting a wedding for your son or daughter and you're a Dalit family, let's say in some small village outside Chennai or somewhere else in the south, or for that matter in UP, you will have your small group of people you might consider your peers. Although I have to say, peer in India is a very tricky thing. Nobody wants to be a peer of anybody else. Everybody wants to be slightly above. So, but let's say some broad sense of peer. Then the people below you, people who are even poorer than, even more miserable, who are then fed separately, separate pankti, this, that. And then your overlords, the dominants, the big jatis, when they deign to come, they have to be given special treatment, sat differently, different plates, different this, different that. So far as we have descriptions, I would say casting food, if I understand your use of that correctly, like racing, gendering, if you say casting food is also there at the very bottom because it's part of the DNA through which rank, respect, superiority, inferiority are coded in India. Food is I've written about this, a few things myself earlier in my life, food politics and so on. It is a huge part of Indian cultural life. So it's not surprising that it's also there among the lowest groups. At least that is my strong impression. There may be changes in this, of course.
Sir, a candidate called Ijo Vincent has used the raise hand option. Ijo, over to you.
Okay, thank you. So I have bit clarifications record about the last portions of your presentation. It's on fear about the Dalit has uh, made the Brahmins to retain their superiority in the caste hierarchy. It's bit confusing, I think. If that is, if I understood correctly, as you said, uh, it could be a kind of rationalization that Brahmins or the Brahminic hegemony has been doing from the since the centuries. So, did you mean so, or can you give a bit of clarification about it? One more thing, uh, I think Brahmins has feared all kinds of categories which are feared to occupy the Brahminic position, and that's why, as Ken Panikkar said, that by the 4th century BC, the original Kshatriyas has been weeded out by the Nanda, throwing away of the Nanda dynasty. The original so-called the Kshatriya Varna has been demolished, and since then Brahmins has been creating a kind of Varna system or caste system which is very convenient to them and make their positions very clear, always at the top. So did I mean correctly? And can you give bit clarification in what way these Dalits become, or the other other backward caste become a challenge to the Brahmins, which made them occupy the position?
So there are two, as I hear you, these are important questions, but slightly different ones. One is this Brahmin picture or presentation of Dalits as deeply impure, to use a simple word, whether that is an imposed hegemonic construction or whether it is something as it were they truly believe in some way. If I understood that part of your question correctly, I would say that because Brahmins are also horrified about their own bodies, there is a certain conviction behind that. I'm not saying, therefore, it's a good idea. The question then is why are they able to convince others? They could just worry about their own bodies, but they've managed to convince many other people that their worry about their bodies is also justified. So everybody has to take care. But they themselves have to take care. As I know from my own historical biographical experience, when women are having their periods, everybody is running in the opposite direction. Inside the heart of the Agraharam, there is a terror of mismanagement of bodily substance, which is then doubled and quadrupled when somebody from outside comes, who's from a lower caste, etc. So my view is, yes, there is a hegemony, indeed. But the hegemony is partly strengthened by the fact that the people at the top have the same horror about themselves. That, I think, adds to its depth and tenacity. But the second question you asked, just remind me again, please, just in a phrase, what the other part of your question was.
Vijay Vincent?
It was a remark about Ken Panikkar's
Yes,
about
thank you.
Kshatriyas disappearing, yeah.
The disappearance of Kshatriyas.
Yeah.
So there I must say I have a slight difference of opinion with you. Biju Vincent, right? I have a slight difference of opinion because early in my career, I did a study for my PhD, which was my first book, a justly forgotten work on Parthasarathi temple in Chennai, Madras, a temple. So politics of temple, endowments, rituals, status in Chennai in the colonial period and up to the present. So I'm not going to give you a Mahabharata about that dissertation or that book, but to say that what I discovered is that Brahmins in Tamil Nadu for sure, and you can then tell me how it compares with Kerala, for example. But Tamil Nadu, Andhra, you could say Brahmins are first of all a small number, right? We know by percentage, 2%, 3%, whatever. Second, the temple priests who are Brahmins are actually looked down upon by other Brahmins. So there is some deep inside problem in the temple. But the biggest historical factor is I actually don't think, unless it's true of Kerala, in Tamil Nadu, you cannot say the Kshatriyas were eliminated because every Brahmin upper caste, the entire DMK, everybody is solidly belonging to what we call the peasant castes, or what Bertenstein called the Sat Sudras. So the Sudra factor, which by the way has also been emphasized by Kancha Illaya, who is not talking of Dalits, he's talking of Sudras. Sudras have played a huge role, especially in the South. So for every Brahmin who is getting profit out of ritual, temples, is that, there are 500 Shudras, Pillais, Mudalayars, this one, that one, who are well above Dalits, who have no interest in Dalits, who are as horrified by Dalits as Brahmins, and who have run the agrarian sector, temples, the economy for 1,000 years in Tamil Nadu. So for me, the interesting thing is how the non-Brahmin upper peasantry or Satsudras has themselves disappeared from the problem, as if Brahmins are imposing it on Dalits. Where are all these people? So in Kerala, my question simply would be, where are all the non-Brahmin upper castes in the history of Kerala? So maybe they are not Kshatriyas because they're not from Rajasthan, saying we are this and that. But if you say who is between Nambudris and the lowest Dalits, there is a lot of people, correct? My understanding is in Kerala, there is a lot of people, whether you call them Nayars, whether you call them Menons, whether you call them Shashi Tharoor's uncle, doesn't matter. But they are there. So I have to say, to express some disagreement with you, I don't know exactly what the distinguished Professor Panikkar had in mind. It may be that in a technical way, the term Kshatriya is not used much in the South. But if you read the inscriptions of Tamil Nadu, or for that matter, Kerala, it is full of kings. And the kings are not Brahmins. They are hiring Brahmins. They are using Brahmins and they control the resources. So you can call them whatever, but they are in that slot, in my opinion. So I have a small difference with you on that matter.
So,
Thomas?
What? Yeah, I think it should be time, right?
As we say in Tamil,
Yeah, you should be
I'm
tired.
an old man, you know.
Yeah,
So
I know.
battery is running down.
Definitely.
Answers will get less successful. You keep on, I'm happy to answer, but the machine will slowly begin to slow down and freak and become less.
So we shall stop then.
yeah, Vijay sir, I'll do one thing. I'll copy all those questions from the chat box and I'll share to you so that you can send it to Professor Appadurai.
Yes,
Will that be
definitely.
fine?
By all means.
Okay, sir. Thank you. So, so it's time to express our gratitude to the speaker for this insightful lecture. So good evening to all. Well, we had the privilege of listening to an exceptional scholar, a leading expert and a major theorist in globalization studies, Professor Arjun for the past 1 hour. Actually, he has shared his expertise on a very crucial topic, the stubborn resilience of caste in India, and we are really grateful for your insights, sir. So thank you, Professor Appadurai, for delivering such a wonderful lecture. Your insights have been incredibly enlightening and thought-provoking, and it was a pleasure to listen to your lecture. On behalf of St. Berkman's College and all the participants here, I would like to express our sincere gratitude and appreciation for the knowledge and expertise you shared with us today. Your session has undoubtedly been of great benefit to all of us, and we are really thankful for your time and consideration. Thank you, sir.
Thanks to all of you, to yourselves, to Thomas, to all the members of the audience, to all those who asked questions and all those who wanted to ask questions and who were patient to hear everything. I'm honored and grateful. So I will also now say goodbye, thanks, and farewell.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
And I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to Professor Peter Thomas, Head Department of English, for his guidance and support throughout this event. His wise counsel and encouragement helped us to ensure that everything was done correctly and efficiently. I'm grateful for his constant support and guidance, which played a very crucial role in the success of this great event. Thank you, sir. Yeah, I want to give a big thank you to Dr. Sebastian from Netta River YouTube channel and Renu from BTV for their hard work and support during this event. I also want to express my appreciation to all those who helped directly or indirectly to make this event a success. Finally, I want to thank all the participants for your enthusiastic involvement and cooperation. Your feedback is valuable and greatly appreciated. And as Professor Peter Thomas mentioned in the welcome address, the valedictory lecture will be held on 17th March, next Friday. We would like to invite everyone to attend this event and mark your calendars accordingly. We welcome everyone and hope to see you there. I'm grateful to everyone for your involvement and cooperation. Thank you all. Goodbye. Good night.
Yeah, let's all together thank Nitin also for the wonderful coordination. And we invite you all for the valedictory, as Nitin mentioned, on the 17th by Slavoj he said. See you all then. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Good night.